You used to think it was just your personality. Some days you're confident, witty, decisive, and then, without warning, you're quiet, foggy, easily hurt. You overthink everything. You avoid mirrors. You reread every message, afraid you've said too much. But it's not random. It's not just mood. It's not just being a woman. It's a pattern. One that's been hijacking your sense of self, without your permission. See, most women were never taught this. You don't have one identity. You have four. Not because you're fake. Not because you're unstable. But because your brain, your actual neurochemistry, changes week to week. Your hormone levels aren't just fluctuating in your body. They're reshaping the way you think, feel, react, interpret the world. So when you wake up one week feeling unstoppable, and the next like a ghost of yourself, that's not a failure of character. That's biology. But no one told you. So you blamed yourself. You said things like, "I'm so inconsistent. I'm such a mess. Why can't I just be stable?" You thought you were the problem. But the truth is, your cycle has been shifting your entire mental operating system. And you were never given the manual. Let's break it down. Week 1. Your period starts. Hormones are low, but rising. Your mind starts to clear. You feel a sense of release. The fog lifts. You start planning again. Week 2. Estrogen rises fast. You feel magnetic, creative. You speak more, take more risks, flirt, pitch ideas, say yes to everything. This is your yes self. Week 3. Ovulation ends. Progesterone rises. Your energy slows. You become more cautious, more sensitive to stress. You start needing more sleep, more silence, more reassurance. But the world doesn't slow down. So you start feeling off. Week 4. Estrogen and progesterone drop. Serotonin dips. Your inner critic sharpens. You withdraw. You question everything you said last week. You wonder if everyone secretly hates you. You cry over tiny things. You start to feel like you're losing yourself. And here's the dangerous part. Because no one taught you this, you start thinking the woman in week 4 is the real you. The broken one. The weak one. The emotional mess who ruins everything. But she's not. She's just a version of you in chemical withdrawal. She's walking through an emotional winter, barefoot and silent. While the world demands summer energy, she's not less. She's just raw. And if you don't understand this rhythm, you'll keep rewriting your story, based on the version of you that only exists for a few days. You'll make decisions in week 4 that sabotage what you built in week 2. You'll pull away from people who love you, because the fog tells you you're too much. You'll cancel dreams, because they don't feel real anymore. You'll forget that your identity isn't lost. It's just under a hormonal tide. No one talks about how expensive the identity loss really is. Because when you cycle through 4 mental states a month, your sense of self becomes slippery. One week, you're a visionary. The next, a ghost. And if you don't know that's normal, you start living in constant self-doubt. You second-guess every decision. You don't trust your ideas. You question your own memory. You ask yourself, was I really excited about this project? Or was that just estrogen? Did I say too much at that meeting? Or was I just ovulating? Why can't I ever stay consistent? And that last question, that's where the trap tightens. Because the world has been designed for consistency, linear energy, masculine rhythm. So when your brain moves like a tide, you're told it's a defect, that you're moody, unreliable, too emotional. But what if that was never true? What if your shifting mind isn't the problem, But the misunderstanding around it is, imagine living your whole life thinking you are a failure at focus because your dopamine drops every luteal phase, or thinking you're antisocial because your brain needs stillness before your period, or believing you're dramatic when your nervous system is simply more sensitive for a few days. That's what happens when no one teaches you that your cycle hijacks perception. You live as if every thought is true, every emotion is a fact, every dip is your fault, and that is exhausting. So you start building walls. You stop trusting your own voice. You silence ideas before they reach daylight. You stay quiet in meetings. You avoid intimacy. You shrink, not because you're weak, but because you've learned to fear your fluctuations. You fear the version of you who cries too much, who can't handle noise, who gets irrationally jealous, who feels left out for no reason, who spirals over a single word. You think she's dangerous, embarrassing, a liability. So you hide her. You become an expert at masking, smiling through despair, working through dysphoria, pushing through pain. And every time you do, you teach yourself the same lie. I only deserve love when I'm stable. But let's name this clearly. That's not self-regulation. That's self-rejection. Asterisk, asterisk. You've been gaslighting your own biology. And that has consequences. Because when you don't feel safe inside your own mind, you start outsourcing your identity. You ask others to tell you who you are. You obsess over feedback. You seek constant reassurance. You cling to routines that feel more like cages. And over time, you lose track of what's real and what's just chemical noise. You forget your gifts, your strength, your softness, your sharpness, your rhythm. You forget that there's nothing wrong with being many things at different times. You forget that change doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're alive. It means you are responding, adapting, moving. It means your brain is dancing with your body, not defying it, but to reclaim that truth. You have to look your inner chaos in the eye and say, I see you. I don't hate you. You are part of me, but you are not all of me, because you are not the critic. You are not the fog. You are not the spike of rage, or the collapse of energy. You are the awareness that remains, the witness that watches, the soul that stays, no matter which mask the hormones place on your face. Somewhere along the way, you stopped trusting your highs. You thought your excitement was suspicious. You second-guessed your ambition. You muted your joy, because every time you felt powerful, you knew the crash was coming, and it always did. You'd wake up days later wondering how the woman who loved life on Friday was now curled up on the bathroom floor by Monday, convinced she had no purpose. This emotional whiplash doesn't just hurt. It confuses your entire reality. It teaches you not to believe yourself. So when you feel good, you dismiss it as a phase. When you feel bad, you assume it's the truth. But that's backwards. Because here's the hard truth. Your cycle has been weaponizing your memory. Yes, your actual memory. During the luteal phase, when hormones drop, your brain becomes more focused on danger. It scans for what's wrong. It amplifies shame. It digs up regrets. It brings back old fights, old betrayals, old fears, and makes them feel urgent again. So you relive things you've already healed. You question forgiveness you've already given. You reopen wounds that were already closing, not because they're real in the present, but because your hormones rewind the pain on loop. That's not memory. That's chemical time travel. And it's brutal, because in those moments, You truly believe the worst things about yourself. You believe you're behind. You believe you're failing. You believe no one really loves you. But here's what most people don't know. Those thoughts only visit when your inner chemistry opens the door. They are not truths. They are echoes. They pass. But you need to survive the echo. You need tools, anchors, reminders. Because if you don't, you start making real-world choices based on temporary perceptions. You delete the account. You send the ending text. You quit the thing that matters. You isolate. You self-sabotage. All because a drop in estrogen makes your mind filter everything through pain. Let that land. Because this isn't just about emotions. This is about consequences. About how many women have derailed their dreams. Because no one taught them that their mental voice can be hijacked once a month. About how many apologies you've had to make for words that didn't sound like you. About how many versions of your life you've burned down because one hormonal phase convinced you it was all worthless. This isn't your fault, but it is now your responsibility. Because once you know this, once you see the rhythm, you can prepare. You can label the thoughts. You can track the days. You can create a system that separates emotion from identity and urgency from truth. You can choose not to act on the version of you that's only passing through. You can say, "This is my week 4 mind talking. I'll wait until next week to decide." And in doing that, you will claim power, not by stopping the cycle, but by riding it consciously, like a surfer who finally sees the wave and chooses when to stand and when to rest. That's what we're doing here. We're learning to ride the tide within. Let's talk about the part no one sees. The part where you keep functioning, but feel hollow inside. You show up. You smile. You reply to texts. You meet deadlines. But inside, you're vanishing. That's the cost of pretending your identity isn't being rewritten every few days. You become two people. The one who appears okay, and the one silently begging to disappear. And the longer you hide that second self, the more exhausted you become. Because masking your true state takes more energy than the state itself. Especially when your hormones are already draining your reserves. But here's what makes it worse. The world praises the mask. You're so strong. I don't know how you do it. You never complain. And you smile. While inside, a version of you is screaming. This isn't resilience. This is survival mode. And survival is not sustainable. Eventually, the cracks show. You snap at someone you love. You forget something important. You lose your temper over something small. You collapse into tears over dishes, laundry, or a comment that wouldn't have hurt you last week. And then comes the shame. The shame of not being in control. The shame of reacting too much. The shame of being human in a world that only respects machines. That shame is heavier than the hormones. Because now it's not just sadness. It's failure. You tell yourself, "I should be better by now. I ruin everything. I'm too sensitive for this world." But what if none of that is true? What if your symptoms are not a sign of weakness, but a language? A message from your nervous system that something needs attention. Something is asking to slow down, to be heard, to be honored. But you were never taught to listen. You were taught to suppress, to push through, to numb. And here's where the damage multiplies. Because when you suppress the sadness, you also suppress the joy. When you mute your inner voice, you also lose access to your wisdom. You forget how to trust yourself. Not just during the bad days, but all the days. And without self-trust, every decision becomes a gamble. You start building a life Not around what you want, but around what you fear you won't handle. You make yourself smaller. You dream safer. You avoid risks. You over-explain. You settle. Not because you lack potential, but because you've been taught that your mind is a liability. But let's flip this. What if your mind isn't broken? Just misinterpreted? What if the fluctuations aren't flaws, but functions? What if the crash isn't the end, but the compost? The clearing, the pruning, the reset. Every cycle is an ending, but also a preparation for the next expansion. Because that's the part we often miss. Women don't just survive their cycles, they build with them. Once you understand your inner seasons, you can sync your actions with them. You can plan your launches during your follicular phase. You can pitch ideas during ovulation. You can rest and review during luteal. You can release during menstruation. You can stop fighting yourself and start collaborating with your brain, with your body, with your rhythm. This is power, not the power of constant performance, but of conscious alignment. A power that says, I don't have to be the same every day to be worthy. I don't have to push to be enough. My cycle is not my enemy. It's my compass. There's something holy about knowing yourself in cycles, not as a flaw to fix, but as a rhythm to honor. Because once you stop demanding sameness from yourself, a new version of power emerges. A softer one, a deeper one, a cyclical wisdom that holds space for all your phases, without shame. And from that space, you can finally say, I'm not unstable. I'm seasonal. I'm not inconsistent. I'm responsive. I'm not too much. I'm multi-layered. Let that reframe sink in, because for too long, the world tried to flatten your complexity, tried to standardize your emotions, tried to box your brilliance into a one-size-fits-all productivity machine. But your body is a symphony, not a spreadsheet. Your mind, a mosaic, not a monolith. You were never meant to operate like a man, or a machine, or a system with fixed outputs. You are lunar, tidal, fluid, alive. And when you begin to work with that, not against it, your life changes. You begin to forecast your lows. Instead of fearing them, you begin to cradle your sadness. Instead of condemning it, you begin to track your energy, like weather patterns, adjusting, preparing, softening. You begin to say no, without guilt. You begin to say yes, without fear of collapse. And most importantly, you stop making decisions based on your weakest days. You wait, you breathe, you allow, because you now know what feels hopeless in week 4 may feel brilliant in week 2. What seems broken in the dark may just need light, and light always comes back. You are not your lowest mood. You are not your worst thought. You are not your most anxious hour. You are the whole cycle, the whole sky, the full spectrum. You contain multitudes, and that is your magic. So let this be the start of a new rhythm, one where you don't fight your body, but listen to her, partner with her, flow with her, because healing doesn't always mean fixing. Sometimes it means finally understanding what was never broken. If this video spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Someone you love might still be blaming herself for a storm she didn't cause. Send it to her. And remember, you are allowed to change. You are allowed to cycle. And you are allowed to come home to yourself. Over and over again. It's not chaos. It's nature. It's not a flaw. It's feminine. And it's not the end. It's just the rhythm. Returning. Always. Easy as that.